How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Set 6, and today we're going to be talking about an interview that's happened over the last few days with Naoki Hamaguchi, Yoshinori Kitase, and Teruki Endo, and they're kind of talking about Remake, Rebirth, and tentatively about Part 3. So, I figured that we'd take a quick look at it, see if there's anything interesting to glean from the video. I'm not going to be able to get the Chapter 14 breakdown out until probably Thursday-ish, it's looking like now. But that's on its way, so I figured I'd give you something in the meantime. I've got a very busy day tomorrow. I've got an event in Birmingham where we've been invited to go down by Logitech, and we're going to check out some new stuff that Logitech have got going on. So that's going to be super cool. Hopefully I'll be able to bring back some cool pictures and footage of stuff from there. We'll see. But in the meantime, let's have a look at this interview. So, like the video, subscribe for future content, but let's jump into it. So this interview popped up in Anime News Network, and like I say, it's with Naoki Hamaguchi, Yoshinori Kitase, and Teruki Endo, and the questions kind of vary. There's a bit of a focus on combat at the very start of the interview, and they're asking about what challenges they faced when they expanded the world and the characters going from Remake to Rebirth. And they talked about how there was a lot more abilities that they had to kind of account for, with synergy abilities and synergy skills and more characters and things like that. And that feeds into why they automated the growth mechanics for weapons, rather than the way that we did it in Final Fantasy VII Remake, where you'd go into the tree and select the upgrades for the weapon. That was all automated in this, and it was because we had more skills, more diversity of abilities and more things to manage, so they decided to consolidate that down, which makes sense. And then we get a little bit of talk about how in the third game they want to give us a little bit more freedom, and they don't want to necessarily have us playing along a pre-planned path. So there definitely seems like there's going to be a bit of a focus on giving us more freedom in what we can do, and I'm interested to see how that's going to manifest itself in a game that is going to have quite a linear story in general, probably. It makes me think we'll be able to go on more diversions out into the world potentially, and do more stuff aside to the main story, which, if it ends up being more than Rebirth, then how big is this third game going to be? And this is already something that I've been thinking about recently, like how big is Game 3 going to end up being? Because if we stay to the path and just add things on top, there's a lot of ground to cover still. A lot of ground to cover. And you've got to think, we've got to add this whole new Wutai segment that we're going to get, because Wutai is going to be drastically different to how it was in the OG. So, yeah. Are we looking at a 200-hour game? This is going to be its own video. This is definitely going to be its own video very soon. Anyway, back to the interview. The interviewer then asked Kitase about, there was reports that the sales for Remake and Rebirth haven't been what they were expecting, and will that then change how they approach Part 3 as far as console exclusivity goes? And obviously Kitase can't say anything about that. It's probably going to be a deal that's already been done for the whole Remake project, I would guess, with Sony, where Sony get exclusivity of at least 6 months to a year, I'm guessing. And I don't know if that's going to be changeable. I don't know if that's going to be something that they'll be able to change. Maybe once Part 3 is out, that's when we'll see it open up to go onto other consoles. But at the minute, it's not looking good. After that, we get a little bit of chat about the expansion that they put in to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and the things that they've added, like new character backstories and new scenes. And pretty much everyone just talks about the date and how they're really happy with the variety of date scenes that they added in, giving everybody a moment to shine in that section of the game. And then for Endo, he talks about the scene between Dyne and Barrett, which, agreed, it is one of the best scenes in the game. It's just a shame Palmer had to turn up at the end and ruin it a little bit. But yeah, the Dyne and Barrett scenes came across so well, they were so well done, and yeah, absolutely love it. And Teruki Endo seems to agree with me, which is good. Or do I agree with him? I don't know how that works. The interviewer then talks about how Cloud's big dance number in Remake was one of the more ambitious and challenging scenes, according to Hidekazu Miyake, and goes on to ask if Aerith's performance of No Promises to Keep was a similarly difficult scene, but Hamaguchi points out that it was actually the parade scene during Rufus's inauguration, and it makes sense because they had to get people that they'd film in different spots doing the routines, and they had to have people that were capable of doing the routine and everything like that. So yeah, I can imagine that was a fair bit to bring together. I can imagine that was a fair bit to bring together. We then get to a question about Stamp, and they ask about how people have been trying to decode the secrets of the timelines based on the variations of Stamp, and Hamaguchi just talks about how the reason that they added Stamp and all the different versions of Stamp was so that they could signal the different layers and different timelines and everything like that. So it's 100% what everyone expected it was. You see a different Stamp, you're in a different world. We've kind of already had this confirmed to us, but yeah, it's good to hear them saying it as well. Then they say that the wildest theory that they've heard is that Chadley is going to end up being the bad guy, and I don't necessarily think he's going to be the bad guy, but I definitely think he's sus. Like, I don't think he's evil, but there's definitely something suspicious going on with our Chadley, almost as if he's the observer watching all of these events pan out. There's very much something suspicious about Chadley. I don't necessarily think he's pulling all the strings, and he's like, will kill Sephiroth and kill Jenova at the end of the game, and then Chadley is going to rear up and be like, I am the true evil villain. Like, that'd be ludicrous. That'd just be ludicrous. I don't think that's going to happen. But he's definitely sus. Definitely sus. And then Kitase goes on to talk about the game, and he talks about how people keep asking, how much is the story going to change from the original? And Kitase basically says the same thing that they've been saying the whole time, where they're not going to betray the spirit of the OG, and the people who play the game aren't going to feel that it's betrayed the original game, but at the same time it's 27 years later, and that there are things that they feel that they can do now that they couldn't do then, and that could bring a different type of happiness. And for me, 100%, things are still open to a big change in Part 3. They've left plenty of threads open for the narrative to change, and I think it's going to feel a bit empty and hollow if we don't get a good payoff at the end of this. If we just get the exact same ending as the OG, it's not going to feel like it meant anything in a lot of ways. Not the game, like the experience of playing the game obviously does, but the narrative is going to feel a bit muted if it just ends up going exactly the same way. So I'm a bit worried about that, but I don't think it will. I think they've done so much setup for things to end up different in some way that there's going to be differences. Like 100%. I'd be amazed if there isn't. Now, we get a little bit of combat stuff, and we also get a little bit of chat about Queen's Blood, and I'm starting to think that there is going to be a Queen's Blood game of some sort that comes about eventually. I don't know if it's going to be a physical thing. So in the interview, they're talking about how they've built a physical stage and deck for the game. I don't think we're going to see anything like that. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. There is a Final Fantasy trading card game. You never know. But I think it would be foolish if we didn't end up with a digital version on mobile or something like that. I mean, they could be really lazy and just try and incorporate it into Ever Crisis if they wanted, a game that's already installed on loads of people's phones, but I think they could just make it a standalone thing, and it'd do well. It really would do well, I think. It's Triple Triad all over again. It's Triple Triad all over again. So yeah, I don't think we'll get anything physical, but I definitely think we'll get a digital rendition of Queen's Blood at some point. They're leaving money on the table if they don't, and businesses don't like to leave money on the table, so I kind of expect it. After that, we get a little bit of chat about combat and which boss mechanic was the most satisfying to pull off, and Teruki Endo says that it's the Galian Beast. I didn't particularly enjoy the Galian Beast fight that much, I'm going to be honest with you, but each to their own, each to their own. And then right at the end of the interview, we talk about how Rebirth remakes one of the most famous cutscenes in video game history, and that some reactions post-game included confusion over how to interpret the new development of the scene. And is this a reaction that they were looking to garner from players? And do they have anything to say to players who feel this new version of events is confusing or unsatisfying? And Hamaguchi and Kitase basically both talk about how they knew that things were going to have to be different a little bit, and with Hamaguchi he was thinking about how do we leave things going from game 1 into game 2, and then from game 2 into game 3. And obviously you've got to leave yourself with a cliffhanger and some talking points, something for people to discuss. But in general, Hamaguchi basically says that he's quite happy that there's both negative and positive reactions to the scene, because that's kind of what they were going for. They wanted to create a talking point and create a bit of confusion. And Kitase goes on to add to that, talking about how In the original game, it was in Cloud's perspective and it showed his feeling of immense loss and losing someone that he loves. And when they were considering how to do that in the remake series, they thought about not only expressing that loss, but also the inability to move on from that loss and forget that loss. And that is kind of what we see with Cloud at the end, although I feel like there's a bit more to it than that. But it was definitely all about trying to change the lens that we look at the ending through a little bit. And we're not so much seeing through and just seeing Cloud's pain, but we're also seeing his struggle after that as well. And they don't only want us to see that in Cloud, they want us to feel that. So, yeah, very much the answer that I expected to that question. They're not going to come out and say, oh yeah, she's alive, mate. And they're not going to come out and say, oh yeah, she's dead, mate. Or anything like that. You know, they're not going to ruin that. They've set this up for a reason. And I think we are going to get a big payoff in part 3. And I really hope that we do get payoffs for a lot of the changes that we've seen. Like, even if it does stay reasonably close-ish to the OG's ending, like, I don't think it can be exactly the same anymore. I just don't think it can be. Purely because of the things that they've set up. So yeah, it's going to be a fun time for the next 2 or 3 years discussing everything, mulling everything over. Like, obviously when we get the first trailers drop for part 3, everyone's going to go into full-blown meltdown at that point. But until then, it's just a case of just sit back, break things down logically, methodically, compare it to things that we already know from the rest of the compilation, and do the best that we can. That's all that we can do. But I will say that they've definitely succeeded in creating that mystery, not only at the end of Remake, but also at the end of Rebirth. And now they just need to pay it off. They've just got to stick the landing in part 3 and pay it off. And everyone will be happy, I think. As long as they do that. Well, not everyone will be happy. We live in the world that we live in now. You can't make everybody happy. But you know what I mean. The bulk of people will be happy. I get worried that they're going to backpedal or something like that. That's what I'm worried about. And that these changes that we've seen are all going to amount to nothing. But we'll see. We shall see. We shall see what happens. Anyway, that's going to be the end of this one. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you're thinking about the interview in the comments below. Any thoughts that you've got on the Rebirth project. And keep an eye out, because in the next few days, part 14 will be up. And then we can finally get into some proper theory videos. Oh, it's going to be fun. I've already got like 3 or 4 queued up, ready to go, so brace yourself. It's going to be fun. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like the video, subscribe for future content. But more importantly than all of that, have a great day.